I think we've reached a good critical mass. I'll get this started. It's awesome to see the global community here. If you're on the East Coast of the US, like myself and Emmanuel, this is a nice little lunch and learn. If you're in California, the West Coast, this is a nice thing you could sip with your coffee. And if you're in the UK, Europe, and Asia, this is a nice way to wind down your day. So welcome, everyone. This is an effective stakeholder communication workshop. And you'll be learning two things in the next 30 minutes. One, how to successfully pitch or tell your story to senior stakeholders and executives. And two, how to answer questions effectively, clearly, and concisely. I believe communication is best learned through interaction. And for that reason, I have the pleasure of introducing Emmanuel, who's joining me to cover these communication concepts. Emmanuel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me today. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a great session. It's really something that it's close and dear to my heart. I've started my career as a data engineer focused on trading systems in capital markets, and moved on roughly through professional services. So I moved on to consulting and started working with other firms and really focusing on what is the data engineering in the capital markets. It's brought me to a few different stages of the journey, from more junior to more senior, that has really helped me focus loads on the communication. I've had to speak with senior executives, like the C-level type, white air, that very interesting too, and the more junior executive, middle management, to then give it all up and go back to being a hands-on engineer myself. So go back to writing code and model tables and pipelines of that. So I've had lots of fun learning to tailor my communication from super, maybe more junior audience, to more senior person, to executives that care about KPIs and business objectives, to executives who care about more technology. So it'd be great to be here today with you and discuss those and have some fun while we're doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Emmanuel. And we're going to be doing a lot of fun role-playing exercises together. I'm Chris, communication coach for tech and data professionals, and I run the Hidden Speaker community, where I help tech and data professionals become effective, confident communicators. What I saw in the tech industry was the skill that held a lot of people back in their career. My mission is to help close that gap. The purpose of these webinars is to equip every one of you in this audience with actionable tips you could use to start your journey to confident communication. So let's get started with part one, which is how to successfully pitch or tell your story to senior stakeholders or executives. So I want you to all imagine I'm an executive standing in an elevator. I have a big fancy corporate building, 300 floors. I'm going up to floor 300. And we stop first at floor 1. Emmanuel comes in and he uses this opportunity to pitch to me some great idea that he has. All right, so as Emmanuel gives this pitch, I want you to pay attention to two things. One, what is he talking about? What is the topic? And two, what action does he want me to take? Pretend to be in my shoes as the executive and see if this is a good, clear, concise communication. So Emmanuel, stage is yours.
All right, so let's assume I'm walking in the elevator here and I'll find you in. Hey, Chris, how was your weekend?
It was great. How about you?
Yeah, it was very nice. Thanks. It was, we celebrated, do little things here and there. I spent some time outdoors with the kids, and it was fun to be there. Nice. I was chatting with your team last week, Tuesday, I think. Yeah, it was Tuesday. I met with one of your salesperson, and they were saying there's some trouble with the spreadsheets there. There's numbers don't match up, and it's not real clear what they're doing. But is that did you know about this?
I did not know about this. What should we do about this?
Yeah, so I guess my team could meet with your team. We could talk about the problems and see where, if there's anything that we can.
I am so sorry, Manuel. We reached floor 300. I have to get to my office. I'll catch you another time.
All right. Okay, Chris. I'll ping you on Slack.
Take care.
Cheers.
All right, to everybody watching that interaction, please do put in the comments what you think. Was that good communication? Was it bad communication? What are the reasons for your choice? And there is a bit of delay from StreamYard, which is what I'm using to stream this, and LinkedIn. So if I don't see your comment immediately, that is the reason why. But please do put in the comments, what did you think about that interaction? And while we're waiting for those comments to come in, what were you doing purposefully when you were communicating with me?
I was trying to showcase one of the main things that I think hold engineers back when you're talking to senior stakeholders, which is like you're overwhelmed. You're talking with some business guy, maybe in a suit, in your fancy elevator. You're going to the executive suite of the 300th floor, and
Yes.
I'm just there rambling. I want to tell you something, but I have no idea to articulate that. And I'm just literally overwhelmed that I'm even getting a chance to talk to you. But I really want to get my point across, and I just get around in circles, and I don't get anywhere. And it's even weird that I'll be riding the elevator with you all the way up to the 300th floor, right?
Yes.
I stayed in the elevator just to tell you exactly something, but still got overwhelmed and didn't deliver when I had a chance.
Perfect. And a lot of comments reflect what you said. Wasted opportunity, unclear message. Daniel says, slow to define the problem, unclear next steps.
Oh,
And that's a great encapsulation of it, because as an executive, what I need is for you to get to the point really fast. I want everyone to imagine that whenever you speak to someone in that kind of position of authority who's very short on time, you're always having to watch your watch and make sure that you get to the point as quickly as possible, or you'll lose the opportunity to influence them and persuade them of something. So something important you brought up, Emmanuel, was you felt really nervous imagining that I was this executive. Have you found any techniques to help you when you go into these kinds of situations?
Not so much of a technique, but just get to do it. Like do it as much. Like they're just people like yourself. And if you're working, it might sound odd to say, right, in a corporate setup, clearly the priorities are different, but at the end of the day, we're all there working, we're all trying to solve an issue. And look, they'll be more than welcoming if you're solving something, if you're solving a pain point, and you're coming to the meeting to talk to them with that idea that you have something of value to add. I find that most of the times they are receptive. And if that is not a good time, they'll just tell you, hey, look, let's talk about this later on. But I found that really doing that more and more helped me, and make sure that I have a clear message for them. If I have nothing to say, just say hi, talk about the weather. Don't waste the opportunity rambling. You can always send it, like if you see somebody in the morning and you didn't get a chance to convey the message, you can ping them back later on and say, sorry, go short on time today. I would like to talk about this, and shoot your shot at that point. But rather, if you're somebody who, as in the example, maybe it's better suited to write the message as opposed to speak the message, that's totally fine. Just take the time to do so as opposed to try it on.
I love that. And it speaks to the importance of communication in different kinds of scenarios. If we're talking to a friend, personal setting, talking off the top of our head, going in different places is more okay, because the purpose of those conversations is relationship building. But in business, efficiency is the name of the game. You have to get to the point, you have to add value, and in as short as time as possible. So it's always important to think about the context that you're in when you're communicating. What I'd love to do now is talk about the good example. So I know you were doing several things to purposefully be bad at communication. Now let's repeat the scenario. We're in the elevator. I'm going to floor 300. You walk in. Give me a good example of that pitch.
Okay, let's try this.
All right.
So I'm walking in the elevator doors again. So, hey, Chris, hi, how are you? How was your weekend?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, it was very nice, thanks. Look, real quick before we get to the floor, I spoke with some of your team last week. They were talking about some problems with the spreadsheet where the numbers didn't match up. My team has experience doing those things. So I was thinking we'll write a little proposal, we'll send it to you, we'll speak with your team. It shouldn't take too much of your time. Maybe we meet again this week for 10 minutes. We'll give you a rundown of what we could do to help you fix those problems, if indeed there are problems, and we can reconvene. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good to me. Oh, I have my floor here. I'm going to get off. I'll talk to you
All right.
later.
Enjoy your breakfast. Thank you.
You too. All right. So that was a lot more short and concise. And what else were you doing to make that better communication?
I was just trying to cut the chit chat, unfortunately, as much as I love it. And as much as, it's nice to connect with people through that.
Right.
That was not the time and place. I really want to convey the message that, hey, I know you have a problem. My team can add value, can help you solve the pain point. Can we actually talk about it? if that is a problem. Is that a problem for you? Your team thinks it is. Is it really? And in that case, my team can help you. Can we look into how? So that was the message that I was trying to convey. I was really holding my horses because I didn't want to ramble too much, talk about technology. It did feel like this elevator ride was shorter than the previous one.
Yes, it was. It was. We upgraded the elevator since that last.
Okay, fair enough.
Perfect. And what you spoke to is the importance of, again, getting to the point as quickly as possible. Whenever anyone goes into these kinds of situations where you need to talk to your boss, manager, executive, always have the message in your head. Try and phrase your point in one short sentence. Then have in your mind the vehicle, the structure you're going to use to convey that point. Just those two things, point, and then what's the structure I'm going to use to get there and support it. So what you did in that was you said things about the action we need to take, the next steps, the problem that we're experiencing, how to resolve it. So those 3 milestones are what you had in your mind, I imagine, when you delivered the point. And it's important to always have those and just smoothly go through them as short a time as possible. Perfect. So that concludes part 1. Does anyone have any questions about pitching, storytelling, structure, concise communication at this point? It's the time for questions before we get to part 2.
And while the questions come in, Chris, you as an executive, how did you feel in the two examples while I was talking to you?
Yeah. In the first example where you were rambling and talking about irrelevant topics, I was annoyed. I was trying to be as polite as possible, but at any moment, if I was actually frustrated that day, had a bad morning, I would have cut in and say, hey, don't waste my time. I gotta move on with my day. But in part 2, you in your second version, you got to the point more quickly, and immediately from one of the first sentences, I said, okay, this does have value. Let me continue to listen. So it's important to hook people from the very beginning to make sure you get to that point quickly. Any questions? Feel free to put in the comments any questions. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, was there anything that you were worried about when delivering that second version to me? So when you were giving the concise version, was there anything that you've encountered in previous experiences that makes those situations difficult?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that might come to mind is, why were you talking to my team? Why was my team rambling to you about problems? Like, who are you? That if I were the executive, that would have been the first thought. Why is my team discussing internal problems to you? Like, can you help? Do you know us? Do I know you? Where is the relationship coming from? Does my team talk with somebody? Like, are they wasting? My mind would be racing around so many other things that I would barely listen to the message. So if they have to say just enough to get them hooked, but not enough to get them scared that something else is going on. Maybe their team are doing something they shouldn't be doing. Is there a problem with the numbers? Are they reporting numbers wrong to somebody else? Are they giving the wrong numbers to the board because there's a spreadsheet with a typo somewhere? Those are the type of things that you don't want their mind to race on as soon as you go and go in for the pitch, right? So to try and mitigate those, do you really think this is a problem? Can we talk about it and see if indeed is a problem for you? Maybe not, right? Maybe it's some silly things that people would like to get optimized, but it's not a material impact, right? So just want to put their minds at ease from the get-go about it.
Yeah,
and that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, I was talking to someone else about how they pitch successfully to their executives, and they said the number one thing is make the pain as visceral as possible for them. Make them understand how bad it would be if we continued on this trajectory, and then you'll get their interest. They'll say, okay, we should pay attention to this, maybe listen to the solution. So you spoke to that very well, that example. Now, the question that came in from Syed was how to present better in front of stakeholders. Do you have any initial thoughts on that, Manuel?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say try to understand and qualify your stakeholders. Are they business stakeholders? Are they technical stakeholders? Are they something else? So that will give you the outline of how your message should be tailored. So you Are you going to talk technology to them? If they're business, maybe not. Are you going to talk something else? So that is really the first thing. And then once you've identified the type of language that you are going to use with them, then how are you going to present the message? And again, as I said, for example, if you're talking to an executive, if you say too much about a problem of a wide scope that they don't know about, and you're blindsiding them in the elevator, their mind is going to be racing to 1,000 places. They're not going to be listening to you. So you have to be careful and choose the words that you use so that you control the narrative of that conversation, as opposed to let their mind go wild, which is perfectly normal. You would do the same. Imagine some friend will come to you and tell you something that you didn't know that impact you. Then you'll be thinking about all the possible consequences, right? So I would say really think about whether they are technical stakeholders, they're business stakeholders, and tailor your language. Now, once you know which language to use, then see what the message is and how you want to deliver that. Why is that important to them in such a way that you control their attention and it's not just going somewhere else at the time. Those would be my two initial points. How would you build up from there?
Yeah, I would do the same. And I think we're actually going to have a perfect example of this in part 2, where it's so important to not only research your audience if possible, as you alluded to, but also understand what is the difference between their wants versus their needs. So they might explicitly say to you, I want this, I want a dashboard, but what do they actually need? And that comes from experience working with them and also understanding their pain points. So I think that's a perfect segue to part 2, where we will be talking about how to answer questions effectively, clearly, and concisely. So everyone imagine, and I see there's another question, we'll get back to that in the last Q&A session at the end. I want you to imagine that the conversation between me and Emmanuel went well because he applied all the great techniques we talked about in part 1. Clear, concise communication, getting to the point very quickly, acknowledging my pain points. And let's say I set up a follow-up meeting. We have a Q&A where I ask him questions, he answers them about this proposal that he has. So what we're going to do in part 2 is I'm going to ask Emmanuel questions and he'll answer them. And we'll evaluate, is it good communication or bad communication? So Emmanuel, welcome to this meeting. My first question to you for your proposal is, what is the cost of this proposal?
Good question. You mean cost in terms of dollars, in terms of time? What cost?
Let's say financial costs.
Okay, so financial cost. One sec. Let me check. So financial cost probably going to be. So say we were to go ahead, $1,000 maybe server cost here. We'd have to buy a new license on that, and then probably dev time.
Are you calculating this in real time with me now?
No, I was just checking my notes here. Maybe I'll get back to you.
Yeah, please do get back to me with a better estimate.
Okay.
Yeah, so that example was perfect for showing it's okay to say you don't know, and just don't waste the other person's time. Always, as we talked about in part 1, try and add value as much as possible instead of trying to talk off the top of your head. If you're not prepared, it's okay, say so. Say when you'll follow up with them at a certain date and time. Let's do the good example of that question. So the question is, what is the cost with this proposal?
Yeah, so briefly speaking with the team, we think this is a 10-hour effort, and we can get you to a stage where you can evaluate the solution. Based on the time that you spend on evaluating that, we will iterate back and forth for a few hours. So you can probably factor in 1 to 2 weeks of man hours between mostly of 80% our team, 20% your team. And then depending on where that goes, we'll talk about licensing costs for any solutions there you'll be looking into. It's really hard to get those now because we need to understand your pain points better before we can come in with the tool. So initial cost will be all people cost. And again, you can factor in 20% your time for like 2 weeks and 80% my team for the same amount of time.
Cool. What I liked about that response is, even though my question was about finances, let's say you didn't know that off the top of your head, but you did talk about something from your area of expertise, which is how much time it might take. You talked about the hours involved. So that's what I always recommend in these kinds of situations. We can't know everything. So talk about something from our experience, perhaps a previous project we did, some successful initiative that we accomplished. What did we learn from that? What can we bring to the table here that's relevant? And then say, okay, well, I don't know precisely the answer to the question you asked, which is respect to finances, but I will get back to you on that. So you're adding value and then saying, I will get back to you with the gaps that I need to fill. Anything else that you did for that?
And you can press me on right there, right? You could say, okay, but just give me an estimate. Okay, but help me understand. Is this going to be loads, little? And keep asking me that question and putting me on the spot to try and answer.
Yeah,
which is an interesting dynamic, right? Because I'll just I'll keep going in circles and trying to evade and don't commit to a number.
Yeah,
which will just frustrate you more, and it's not going to be helpful to the relationship. So it's good to come in prepared for that type of question.
Absolutely. The key thing for these, especially executive presentations or meetings, is to be prepared. So don't just know the material on your slides, for example, but know, let's say 3 times more than that. Anticipate all the questions they'll ask you. Try and poke holes in all of your argument, or get a friend or someone on your team to help poke holes in your presentation, and then come prepared for answers to every single question. If you have that basin of knowledge to work from, you can't be stumped for 99% of questions, let's say. All right, let's go to question 2. So after answering that question, I ask you, all right, so what are the risks with this proposal?
Yeah, so the risks could be that, for example, the solution doesn't meet your need, and we end up with a different paradigm than what you're currently using, and the sales team stop using it, but then they'll go back to the other solution, or maybe you don't want it, or we do something else. There could be a few, but we can mitigate those risks.
Do get to me later on. Have a better answer for me. All right. So that goes to show, as we talked about in part 1, rambling all over the place is frustrating for me. I'm sitting there trying to figure out, what are you saying? What is the answer to my question? And you're just wasting my time. So the best thing to do, if you don't know the answer, in addition to the 2-step formula that I talked about before, talk about what you do know from your experience and then how the situation is different. Pause before you speak and have the time to think about what is your point, and then what vehicle, what structure and framework are you going to use to support it. So that's a key step there. Anything else you were doing in that example?
I was trying unsuccessfully to curate the delivery so that it wouldn't sound like the only bad way of communicating is using too many hums and ha's. But also the content of what you're actually saying does matter. So there were some bits and pieces there that made sense, right? So there's risk of failed solution, there were a risk of people not liking it, or risk of spending money on something that doesn't. But the message didn't really come across to you. Somebody else who's worked with me on the presentation maybe really understood it, but to you hearing the first time, like, yeah, that's obvious. Sure, yes, people may not like it. We knew that before starting. What are you talking about?
Excellent. So the takeaway there is you have to have good content to begin with, so have your point ready. You also have to deliver it well. You need both. Instead of filling it with a lot of ums and uhs that make the message less clear, it's important to be confident in what you say. And if you know your material, there's no reason you shouldn't be confident in all the words that you say speaking to it. Let's do one final question that we have time for. And let's, for the sake of time, just do the good response for it. So my question to you is, what are the benefits of this proposal?
I'll flip the question to you, actually. Let's say, okay, so your team discussed about these pain points. So if we were to solve these in this order, what would that look like for your team? Let's say there is indeed a problem with the numbers, and what would this improve?
Well, we want a one-stop place where everybody can gather together and find the insights they need, instead of what we're doing right now, which is looking all over the place in different kinds of spreadsheets. Can your solution do that?
We can build it in such a way that it does, but there's going to be some limits, right? There's surely commercial proposals that will do better. So my objective here is really getting you to this point where you can understand what that would look like. And then you have the tooling at your disposal to say, okay, let's go ahead, buy the license for a commercial tool that could do this for us, or let's stick to a homegrown solution because right now suits our needs and we don't need the extra cost. So really getting you to be able to make the decision would be the win for us.
Mm-hmm. I like it. What I really liked that you did there was, if my question, you didn't understand it completely or it wasn't clear, you asked me a question. You have to put yourself in the position of authority. Remember, you still have power in the situation. I'm not asking you these questions to make you look like a fool or anything like that. You can set yourself up to answer well by asking clarifying questions. And you did that very well there. Awesome. So any final questions before we bring things to a close? What we covered throughout the workshop today was getting to the point, being clear and concise in your messaging, understanding your audience, taking the time to understand their pain points, their wants versus what they need, the questions behind their questions. So if they ask you, let's say, what are the benefits of this proposal? What are they really trying to gain from you? And that's, how can this help me? How can this help my company? Put your questions in the chat and we'll answer them. And while those questions are coming in, I'll answer the question that was posed earlier, which is, how do you handle change of topics mid-presentation? Emmanuel, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yes, very hot thoughts and more polite thoughts at the same time.
Okay.
I guess, it really depends on the setup. I may handle it differently. If it is like a closed door presentation, few people, then I might just address the question and then go back to the main topic and try to understand, hey, why are you asking this question right now? What are you trying to understand of this presentation that you haven't gotten yet, that you're not understanding, that you need me to spend more time on, right? Mm-hmm. The question could simply be that, I wasn't clear on the delivery of some parts and they can't follow along because now they're thinking about it. So just by you reiterating that point would help them catch up with you, and then you can move close. You can move together the rest of the presentation. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. If it is more of a town hall type scenario where you're presenting across 200, 300 people, and they ask a question that makes you change the topic, it's very important for you to catch you doing that and get back on track. In that case, you address it, or you might say, hey, this is coming right next up in some other slide. Or you can say, okay, we could do this at the end. Let me run you through the rest of the presentation first. And if you still have the question, we'll talk together during the Q&A session. Mm-hmm. Usually that is where I see the topic changing. Somebody asks the question that derails you. Other than that, you control the narrative, and it's up to you to keep it on those rails.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To add on to that, just as we were talking before about the power you have as a presenter and communicator to ask clarifying questions so that you're set up to respond better. When you're presenting yourself, you must remain in control of the presentation. Of course, the purpose of the presentation is to connect with your audience to best serve their needs. So answer questions as they come up. But remember that if a question derails you from the purpose of the presentation, you have to bring things back on track. You have to remain the leader of the presentation. Where I see a lot of presenters, the pitfall that comes up is they rely on the slides overly to dictate the narrative. They themselves feel less confident about directing it. So if we change directions, they're also less hesitant to say to people, hey, we need to get back on track. But remember, that is your responsibility as a presenter. All right, so last question is, how do you set boundaries so that this data project doesn't become a black hole for the other team to abuse? Is that question clear to you, Emmanuel?
I think so.
Okay.
And I would say, like, any data project eventually will become like a black hole of, actually, the way I like to describe it is that where you are the data pharmacists and you're just filling prescriptions. So the stakeholders come to you with a prescription, they want the data, you just fill it for them and go away. And it's up to, that's up to the tech leadership, first of all, to ensure that is not the type of culture that the team follows. But it also goes to the non-tech leadership in the team and everybody in the team to not behave as the pharmacists. Just ask questions. The reason why I asked you the question earlier when you told me what was the value,
Mhm.
And I asked you, and I flipped the question to you, is because as a data leader or any tech leader in the organization, I want to know what type of initiatives I'm working on,
Mhm.
right? So if somebody asks me, hey, what is the value of your team? I want to know if I helped you fix the numbers that get reported to the board or fix the numbers that the salespeople rely on, as opposed to some other menial report that, yes, be nice to have, but nobody cares at the end of the day. So it's really up to that. Just have the leadership of the team and everybody in the team have a culture where you're not just giving data, and you are helping the business and not the stakeholders, but the business itself.
Yes, I think that's a perfect analogy to data pharmacists, essentially, is what we are. And that's how we move from being cost centers, which is the typical stereotype for us, to profit centers. And I'll take that last question and then wrap things up. So Fabrizio's question is, how do you handle stakeholders that are not fully engaged in the conversation? So if they ask a question, no one replies, or they just feel like they're not actively listening. What I would recommend in those situations is make it clear how that impacts you. And a framework I recommend for giving feedback is situation, behavior, impact. So you talk about the situation, you can talk about the last meeting that you had with those stakeholders. You can talk about the behavior. You can say, in that meeting, I would have liked to see some responses related to the proposal, and it would really help me to receive those. And then the impact, you talk about what is the impact of you not receiving those responses. You can say, because I did not receive those responses, it is not clear to me what direction we should take with the project that would be beneficial for you. So keeping it like that when you deliver the feedback, keeping it to the facts, what happened in that situation, not assigning any personal or character flaws in that, but just talking about the situation and how it could be improved, how it impacted you, what you need moving forward. That's how you confront stakeholders who may not be giving you the responses that you need.